What is your
craziest
adventure? Is it eating scorpions in Thailand, falling off a waterfall in the Adirondack Mountains of New York when I was 14 and almost dying, trekking in the Himalayas? Is it almost getting into a fight with Busta Rhymes? That is a story for another time. Is it swimming with Komodo dragons in Indonesia? Is it taking the boat to Komodo Island, this rickety little puttery boat which almost capsized in the middle of the ocean? So this is a question I get asked a lot. What is my craziest adventure? It's kind of hard to answer because what's crazy for me might not be crazy for you. A lot of times when I'm doing these natural water slides, cliff jumping, climbing mountains out in the wilderness, like it's not too crazy for me. It's become normal. But someone who doesn't hike, doesn't go out in the wilderness, doesn't encounter rattlesnakes and bear poop and stuff like that, or they don't cliff jump or do natural water slides, that seems crazy to them. But I have one story of international adventure that encompasses a lot of different characteristics. Paragliding off a mountain, learning falconry, and then getting tested for malaria after being on a tiger safari in Bardia National Park, where, by the way, I almost got charged by a wild rhino. I'm talking about my trip to Nepal. We were in a part of Nepal early on in our trip where we were on a tiger safari in Bardia National Park, and that was labeled by the World Health Organization and some other organizations as a malaria hotspot. So when we were there, we took precautions with bug repellent, but we did get bit by mosquitoes when we were in Bardia National Park. So a few weeks later, when we transitioned to Pokhara, Nepal, which is the jumping off point for Annapurna Base Camp, the Annapurna Circuit, and several other treks in the Himalayas of Nepal, I got really sick. With malaria, one of the things is you get violently ill. It's a lot like flu-like symptoms, vomiting, diarrhea, cold sweats, and then you feel better for a brief period of time, and then you feel bad again. So I had been feeling ill, but then I was feeling better. So we booked this paragliding thing over Phua Lake, which is beautiful, you know, a tandem paragliding, because I'd never done it before. It's basically like parachuting, except you jump off a mountain instead of out of a plane. So we paraglide off this mountain, float around Phua Lake. It's absolutely beautiful. Then we go back to the people that run the paragliding, because what they actually do is para-hawking, and they use hawks to guide the paraglider. However, we missed the para-hawking for that day. So we were able to go back after the paragliding and learn falconry at their base camp. So we're learning falconry. I got a big ass bird, I forget what kind of bird it was, on my arm, and I just start getting lightheaded and passing out. And so I go and lay down, and my wife is learning the falconry. She's getting all the great shots of the bird taking off and coming back and feeding the bird and all this badass stuff. Meanwhile, I am like having cold sweats. It almost felt like a relapse in the other room on their couch, shivering and just quaking and feeling terrible. I felt like I was gonna die. We told the falconry people what was going on, and they said you should probably go get tested for malaria at the local hospital. The interesting thing about this hospital in Pokhara was it had 3 tiers of pricing. It had local pricing, expat pricing, and tourist pricing. And the local pricing for the test was like $2 or $3 for the malaria test. The expat was like $40. And then the tourist price was like $200. The falconry people told us we should try to get the expat pricing because it's a lot cheaper. And technically at the time, we were traveling for 4 months. We didn't have a home base back here in the States. We pretty much were homeless or expats living in Nepal. Even though we weren't long-term residents of Nepal, we were expats. So after some bartering, after my wife engaged her superior negotiating and bartering skills that she had honed in India, by the way, they actually gave us the expat pricing, which saved over $150 to get this malaria test. Something I failed to mention was, in that break between when I was feeling really bad before we did the falconry and the paragliding, and then I started feeling really good, I decided it would be a good idea for me to go and seek out a gym to pump some iron. I was feeling much better. I was feeling rejuvenated. I was like, hey, I gotta find a gym to preserve this muscle mass. Now you're saying, oh, that seems like kind of a meathead thing to do. And what you have to understand is back in 2014, I was kind of a meathead. No, I definitely was a meathead. I had actually shot a movie, an action comedy movie where I had to take my shirt off in the movie for the first time in my career. So I was training hard for that scene. I was working out 2 and 3 times a day. I was sparring with my buddy Cody, who some of you may remember from some of my previous videos. I was sparring with Cody like twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and I was in the best shape I'd ever been in my life. And after we shot that movie, we took off and did this trip, this 4-month trip through India, Nepal, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. And I wanted to preserve that muscle mass, bro. I didn't want to lose my muscle mass. A day away from feeling like I was on death's door, I was rejuvenated. I was feeling better. I was like, I feel so great. I'm gonna go to the gym. And I'm like, I'm gonna show these Nepali guys how we train. And what's interesting is when I walked in, one of them was like, are you a professional bodybuilder? Which is hilarious, because I wasn't that big. I mean, I was in shape, but I wasn't like, you know, Jay Cutler, Ronnie Coleman, like professional bodybuilder big. That was that ego trigger, like, oh yeah, these guys think I'm a professional bodybuilder. So I'm going hard. Like normally, you take it easy if you've just been sick, especially if you feel like you're about to die the day before. But me, I'm in there, I'm like, I'm gonna show them how we do it. Working hard, busting ass. And by the end of it, when I got home that night, I was still feeling good, but the next day we were doing the paragliding thing, and that's when it all came crashing down. So probably not the best idea. So what ended up happening is we got the test for the malaria, and while we're waiting, my wife was in the bank next door to the hospital getting the money out to pay for the test. And I'm sitting on the curb out in the streets of Pokhara, and these local Nepali kids come up to me and they start yelling at me. They were kind of just playing around. They were just pushing around and they wanted to play or play wrestle or something like that. And so I felt so terrible. I was sitting on the curb like this and I felt like I was gonna die. I just felt so terrible. And so I was just like, no, no, no. And then I started making these crazy faces. I was like, hey, hey, to try and like jokingly scare them away, you know? But in fact, it had the opposite effect. So I'm making these faces and like trying to scare them away. And they're like, they feel energized. They're like, Undertaker. I had no idea that there were WWE wrestling fans in Nepal. Apparently these little kids were huge wrestling fans. I made that face like that. They were like, oh, this guy's playing the Undertaker. Now all of a sudden that amped up their play wrestling aggressive behavior. And I just feel like I'm gonna die. And they're pushing me around. So of course, I love playing with kids. So I'm picking them up and I'm pretending to body slam them and throw them around. And meanwhile, I feel like I'm about to pass out. And I play with them for about 5 minutes, just play wrestling, and I'm playing the Undertaker and they're doing all this stuff. And I had to sit back down on the curb and they're just pushing me and they're like doing elbow drops on me while I'm sitting on the curb. Just an added comedic element to this whole tale. It turned out I did not have malaria. I had violent, horrible food poisoning from this place that we went, which, side note, if you ever use a guidebook that was written years earlier to choose a restaurant in a foreign country, always make sure you cross-reference that with, you know, something recent like TripAdvisor or something recent, because we used a recommendation off one of the guidebooks. I don't remember which one it was. It was written 2 years previous. We went to this restaurant and we think that's where I got violently ill, horrible illness. It delayed our trek into the Himalayas for about a week, but the good news was I did not have malaria. I missed out on learning falconry. I probably should not have gone to the gym and worked out on that one day I was feeling better. I should have recovered, but my ego wouldn't let me. And then right after that week, when I was feeling better, we took off into the Himalayas to do the Annapurna circuit. I don't think I was 100% recovered when we did that. I've made a few videos on that. If you want to hear more about that adventure, I'd be willing to make another video. Just let me know in the comments down below. But all in all, my time in Nepal was not only full of crazy adventures like this, it was also my favorite time. The culture, the people, the setting, the natural beauty of Nepal makes it a premier spot for adventure travel. I highly recommend you go there and check it out. The people of Nepal are some of the most generous, kind people I've ever met in the world. They were devastated in the 2015 earthquakes. They're still rebuilding so they could use your tourism dollars. If you like this story and you want to hear more crazy adventure stories like this from around the world, hit that thumbs up like button and subscribe for more videos. In the meantime, get out there, find your adventure, and be infamous.
Infamous.